So methane is emitted by cows and other ruminant animals all day long. And they also emit, by the way, carbon dioxide when they breathe. Now, what the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, likes to say is, oh, we shouldn't count the respiration of animals because that's part of the natural cycle. Animals breathe out carbon dioxide, trees take it in. Yeah, except we only have 3 trillion trees now. We used to have 6 trillion. Hey.
Glen, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Ella.
Yeah. Well, I want to start with your backstory. I find it super interesting, given that you were an award-winning playwright and you ended up in Hollywood and that you were writing for the show Blossom, because I was born in 1980. So I was like just early, like preteens when that show came out. And I loved that show. So when I found that out, I was like, yeah, Blossom, throwback.
You were the target audience.
Yeah, well, you got me. That was a good show. So yeah, I'm going to have you just kind of step in there. From there, I know you met Howard Lyman. Would you fill us in on kind of that story?
Yeah. In fact, I was a vegetarian from the time I was 17, but it was while I was writing Blossom that I turned vegan. And the star of our show, Mayim Bialik, eventually turned vegan too.
I know. Did you have any influence on her?
I don't think I could take any credit for that. I don't remember ever saying a word to her about it. But I'll be happy to take credit if somebody wants to give me credit. So I turned vegan when I was on Blossom because I was starting to feel some chest pains. And I had become a vegetarian at 17 because there was so much heart disease in my family. And when I became vegetarian, I had an obese aunt and uncle who were very, very concerned about my health. And they said, where are you going to get your protein? And I ad-libbed from cheese. So I kept doing that from the time I was 17 to early 30s, having cheese for my protein. And then I started to feel these chest pains. And I thought, oh, this is unfair. Here I am in my 30s. My genes are so bad that I'm getting chest pains in my 30s. And I guess most people would go to a cardiologist. I have a fear of doctors. So I just thought about it. And I thought, well, yes, I'm a vegetarian, but I'm eating cheese. Now, I'm not eating meat because of the saturated fat and cholesterol. What is cheese? It's saturated fat and cholesterol. It's liquid meat. So I gave up cheese and I never had a pain since, and I never went to a cardiologist.
And you were 17 when you went vegetarian, which is pretty awesome, and that was for the health. And I've heard you say you didn't struggle with it at all. Like you made up your mind. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I really
I guess other people are different, but when I make up my mind to do something, it never even occurred to me. You know, once I decided that I'd be vegetarian, it never even occurred to me that I would lapse, and I didn't. Why would I do that? And what happened was that morning, I decided to start on the first day of summer vacation after my junior year in high school. And I got up in the morning. I had an English muffin for breakfast. My old buddy Dave called me, and Dave said, I said, Dave, congratulate me. I became a vegetarian. And he said, that's great. Since when? And I said, well, since breakfast. And he laughed at me. And that was, 50 years ago. And I never had meat since then. Maybe because he laughed at me. I don't know. But no, I never considered going back. I knew it was bad for my health. It was emotionally upsetting. I mean, I think it's morally wrong what we do to the animals, but putting morality aside, it was just emotionally upsetting to me what we do to animals. The idea that I was eating a carcass it just didn't make sense. And then when I looked into the science, I realized it's killing us. So I never considered going back, and I wouldn't go back in a million years.
Love that. I love that. And we'll get to your book, Own Your Health, because you tell some really great stories in that book. Where does the story of your dad saving your mother's life, and then that whole story, where does that fit in?
My parents saved each other's lives. My mother, and the point of the story is to begin to understand how to best use medical care. Because in this country, we're obsessed about medical care. Remember when President Obama introduced Obamacare, the terrible protests, and some people saying this is going to ruin our medical care, and other people saying this will give us medical care. And everybody was so caught up in it. The truth is, it really did help Americans financially. A lot of Americans, it lowered their costs for medical care. But it didn't save a lot of lives. And the reason it didn't save a lot of lives is medical care doesn't save a lot of lives. Occasionally it does. There are times when going to the doctor will save your life. There are also times when going to the doctor will kill you, because medical care is the third or fourth leading cause of death in America. So really everybody was emotionally involved with Obamacare on the issue of, will it help us, help our health, help save our lives? The truth is, it helped Americans financially. It may have helped some Americans get access to medical care that saved their lives. It may have helped other Americans get access to medical care that was to their detriment. Medical care is not an unmitigated good. So the point of this story about my parents is to begin to think about when to go to the doctor. My father had a mole on his cheek that was dark, and my father couldn't stand doctors, so he never went to the doctor. One day, my mother said to him that she was worried about her varicose veins, and she wanted him to take her to the dermatologist. So he drove her to the dermatologist. He waited in the waiting room. My mother went into the office, and the doctor said, "What seems to be the problem, Dorothy?" And she said, "The problem is my husband. Will you get him in here?" So the doctor went into the waiting room, brought in my father. My mother put her back against the door and said, "Look at that thing on his cheek. He refuses to go to the doctor." So the doctor looked at it and said, "We're going to have to biopsy that." And it was melanoma. And they scheduled an operation, and it saved his life. Then my father said to my mother, "I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this day that you saved my life." And then they retired to Florida. They moved to Florida. And a few years later, my mother went, because my mother had heart disease. She went to see her cardiologist. My father went with her. And the cardiologist said, "You have a 90% blockage of the carotid artery. You need an immediate angioplasty. I'll schedule it for next week." And my father shouted, "Don't do it, Dorothy. He's just trying to make money. Don't do it. He'll kill you." My father wasn't always diplomatic. And my mother said, "But the doctor says so." And the doctor got irate and said, "Who are you going to listen to? Him? He doesn't know anything, or your doctor?" And my father says, "You do this, I'll divorce you. I'm not kidding, I'll divorce you." So my mother was in a very awkward position. And she said to the doctor, "I'm sorry, but I don't want to get divorced. We just got new furniture." So she didn't have the operation. And that was when she was about 70 years old. And she lived to 98 without any heart attack. After that appointment, my father had her talk to me about diet. And she was already getting close to being vegetarian. I got her more vegetarian and more low fat. And I think objectively, when you make it to 98 without a heart attack, she didn't need that angioplasty. I mean, she needed it if she wasn't going to eat right, but she didn't need it. And there's extreme risks to it. That was how my father saved my mother's life. And the lesson is, go to the doctor if you've got a black mole that looks unsymmetrical and looks, yeah, I mean, dermatologists aren't going to hurt you by doing a biopsy of a mole or something. But don't jump into an angioplasty, you know? Use diet to control diseases that are diseases caused by diet.
Yeah. So, and when did you start to shift from, or not shift from, but or really start considering the animal argument for like the compassion argument? Did that have to do with Howard Lyman?
Maybe to a degree. I met Howard Lyman a year or two after I stopped writing for Blossom, mid-90s. And I learned from Howard what it was like to run a modern animal agriculture business. He had inherited a fourth generation organic cattle farm, and he turned it into a modern, non-organic factory farm. And he crowded the cows on a feedlot and fed them the modern feed with the antibiotics, and use pesticides, prodigiously. His brother died of lymphoma, and Howard himself developed a tumor on his spine and had a successful operation. And so from him, I learned, something about what a modern feedlot is like. But, there are many people who say, oh, I would never eat modern feedlot meat. I eat, grass-fed meat. I get my meat from a happy cow on a happy farm. And my message is, they go to the same slaughterhouses. And from an environmental point of view, as terrible as the feedlots are, they are environmental nightmares with lagoons of manure. The grass-fed is even worse, because the grass-fed cattle are emitting more methane for a longer period of time, because they take longer to fatten before they're slaughtered. And they are using the grassland is preventing us from solving the climate crisis. We need to rewild that grassland. So at least the feedlot cattle are on small plots of land comparatively. The grasslands are vast. 40% of the United States is given over to animal agriculture. Most of that is grassland. So they're burning it into desert, they're destroying it, and they're preventing us from rewilding it and sequestering carbon dioxide. So to people who say, oh, I only eat regenerative meat or grass-fed meat, you're doing more harm than if you were eating the feedlot beef. And it's the same product. It's a dead animal. It's a carcass. The idea that one is healthy and one is unhealthy is preposterous. It's the same thing. You couldn't tell the difference with a microscope.
Yeah. So, well, I want to get into this climate discussion, the food as climate. Before we get there, just for those of listeners that aren't familiar with Howard Lyman, let's kind of close the loop there. So can you finish his little story?
Well, Howard, after he had the tumor on his spine, he kind of made a deal with the Lord when he was going in for his operation. And he said, if I live through this, Lord, I'll try to return my land to an organic operation. And he tried, but the bankers wouldn't let him. The bankers, were given loans to the chemical industry, to pesticide makers, and they weren't going to help him go organic. So he wasn't able to transform it to an organic operation. He eventually got out of farming, and he became a leader and a sought after speaker in the animal rights movement and the vegan movement. So he's alive and well, living in Maine these days. And he, he's a great friend and a hero of mine.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about the climate crisis. In your book, Food is Climate. And one of the things you talk about, the discrepancy between the story we've been told and reality when it comes to both the causes and the solutions for the climate crisis. Can you talk a little bit about this, knowing that it's a huge topic, obviously, and you explore it in great depth in your book. So listeners, go out and get this book. It is extremely powerful. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about that discrepancy between the stories we've been told and the reality.
Well, Al Gore and most of the leaders who have alerted us to the climate crisis have blamed the problem virtually exclusively on the burning of fossil fuels. We have actually known for about 150 years or more that if you take carbon dioxide and you put it in a tube, it's going to heat up more than air. So we know that greenhouse gases cause heating. But what Al Gore and the others have done is they've focused exclusively on the fact that we burn fossil fuels, which contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. And they refuse to look at the fact that it's not just our use of fossil fuels. Animal agriculture is contributing to the climate crisis in ways that dwarf what the oil industry is doing. For one thing, methane is many, many times as potent a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. Those who are trying to skew the debate find ways to try to minimize the effect of the accounting for methane. And they say that if you view it on a 100-year time scale, it's only 20 times worse than carbon dioxide because over time methane degrades into carbon dioxide and water. But when it is emitted, methane is 130 times as potent a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide, 130 times. And when it is emitted, it's therefore heating the atmosphere at that time. And the atmosphere is like an energy grid. When it heats the ocean retains that heat. When it heats the soil and the soil dries up and we have a forest fire, you don't get to say, gee, forest, if only you had waited 100 years, you wouldn't have gotten so hot. So it's the immediate effect of methane that should be counted. It's 130 times as potent as carbon dioxide. And certainly we should be conservative about this. We're trying to save our planet. It behooves us to be conservative and do the conservative and I think more realistic accounting of methane. So methane is emitted by cows and other ruminant animals all day long. And they also emit, by the way, carbon dioxide when they breathe. Now, what the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, likes to say is, oh, we shouldn't count the respiration of animals because that's part of the natural cycle. Animals breathe out carbon dioxide, trees take it in. Yeah, except we only have 3 trillion trees now. We used to have 6 trillion, and we now have 80 billion farmed animals. So if we get to the point where we have 1 trillion farmed animals and 1 tree, are they going to say, oh, it's part of the natural carbon cycle? There's nothing natural about warehouses with 30,000 chickens in them. There's nothing natural of feedlots with 10,000 cows. The natural doesn't apply. So if you count the respiration of all these animals, if you account for methane accurately and conservatively. And if you factor in the most important factor of all, which is called carbon opportunity cost. Now, if you factor in carbon opportunity cost, which is what if those grasslands were rewilded? We've cut down forest and turned it into grazing land. We've removed the capacity of the earth to heal itself. So what if we got rid of all the cows that were grazing, got rid of the grazing land? Of course, we need to move the cows to animal sanctuaries first, but the point is, if we restored the grazing land, what if we restored the grazing land and turned it back into, let it come back into forest, or at least had more vegetation? How much carbon dioxide could we sequester? And a paper was done, a peer-reviewed paper by my friend Silas Rao. And the answer is enough that we could go back to pre-industrial age levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, 280 parts per million instead of 420, where we are now. So in other words, there's all that potential to bring back the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere through carbon sequestration if we got a trillion more trees. We used to have 6 trillion, we're down to 3 trillion. Even if we got back up to 4 trillion, we'd probably be okay. But there's no place to put all those trees unless we stop grazing animals. So when you end animal agriculture, you get far more carbon sequestration. You stop that belching of methane. You stop the use of nitrous oxide, which is 300 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as methane, for the use of fertilizer to grow the grain to feed the cows. You don't have the methane and the nitrous oxide from their manure. I mean, it just helps in so many ways. As Silas Rao said, there's nothing that doesn't improve when you end animal agriculture. There's nothing that doesn't improve.
This is, yes, super fascinating. Now, I've heard you say a lot of what the problem is arrogance, because we really don't know how close we are to the tipping point. Sometimes, I know for me at least, it's hard to feel hopeful when there's so many unknowns and people are so oblivious or in denial. What are your thoughts? Can you explain what you meant by this problem of arrogance?
Well, it's extraordinarily arrogant to take this chance with the whole world for people to say, oh, I love to eat my meat, so I don't care if it's destroying the whole world. Really? Is your meat really that good? You know, I haven't had meat in 50 years, and I haven't had any animal products in 30, 32, 33 years. And I love my food. It's delicious. So what's hard about this? When I hear people say, oh, it's hard to go vegan, it's the easiest thing in the world. Here's what you do. You limit yourself. Now follow me here, Ella, because for some people find this difficult. You limit yourself when you eat to eating human food. Is that really that difficult? You eat beans and peas and lentils, legumes, you eat mushrooms, you eat vegetables, you eat fruits, you eat whole grains. What is difficult about this? You could get your beans in a can. It's already cooked for you. Open the can, you warm it up. That's not hard. You boil the rice or the millet or the buckwheat or the oatmeal. That's boiling. I can do that. That's not very hard. You put either you eat your vegetables raw, or you put them in the steamer, or you put them in a pan, and you could warm them up just with water. Just water. I recommend water over oil. Just saute them in water and put in spices and seasonings. There's nothing difficult about this. There is one thing that's difficult, which is other people. Other people are the problem. Like my aunt and uncle who made me worry about protein. other people are the problem. You need to try to avoid other people as much as possible, or bring them along. But it's going to work and they're having a pizza party, or your
Mhm.
friends are having a barbecue for July 4th or whatever. It's other people who are the problem. People are afraid to stand out from the crowd. And, we're all going to sink together if people take that attitude. You just have to stop listening to other people and do the right thing for your health and for the planet. It really isn't hard.
But it's interesting too, thinking about, there's the individual change and then there's the big systems, the systems that are run by money, really, when it comes down to it. How do you feel about, where that, which is the easier one to help change? Is it the systems or the people? Do the people need to change to change the systems, or do the systems need to change to change the people? How does that all fit together in your mind?
Yeah. It's clearly something where it takes its own course and it's hard to, to choreograph it. But I view my role as being to try to change people's minds. I often make the analogy to gay marriage. If even when Barack Obama ran for president, that wasn't that long ago, 2008. He didn't support gay marriage, and he may have supported it in his heart, but he knew that if he said it out loud, he wouldn't be elected. It was so unpopular. The idea that two men could get married or two women could get married in 2008, that maybe had the support of 20% of the people or something. It was highly unpopular. And by what was it? What year was it? Was it maybe 2015 or so? It was the law of the land. 7 years. And it's because people changed. Gay people more and more often came out as gay. People had their friends, their loved ones, their family members were gay, and they realized, why can't they marry whoever they love? So when the people changed, the system changed. I think if people just get the message, there's nothing hard about this. Eat human food. You're going to get healthier. You'll save money in the long run, at least when you factor in medical bills. And who doesn't want to be healthier, And it's better for the planet. And then if enough people do it, the industry is going to have to follow.
I always love recommending documentaries, right, to people. A lot of people like watching movies, right? So, because Cowspiracy is one of the ones I often recommend to people who show interest. And, that documentary, along with many other documentaries, has gotten a lot of ridicule around the statistics, right? Around discrepancies, what they see as discrepancies in statistics. How do you account for, and I know there are multiple explanations here, but the discrepancy in the statistics out there about how responsible animal agriculture really is for global warming and climate change?
All right, let me give a little summation of the statistics on
Yes.
First, the first statistic that really floored people was from the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They estimated that 18% of greenhouse gases were caused by animal agriculture. So they were not looking at animal respiration. They were just looking at methane from ruminants. And they were probably looking at the energy required because we have to grow the grain and then transport the grain to feed it to the animals instead of our eating the grain directly. So the energy inefficiency of animal agriculture, transportation, methane, and I don't know if there were any other significant factors that they accounted for, and they got to 18% of greenhouse gases. Well, 18% was more than all forms of transportation combined, so that really shocked a lot of people, and it upset people in the animal agricultural industry, who are the clients of the IPCC. So the IPCC said, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. It isn't really 18%. They lowered it to 14.5%. to accommodate the International Meat Secretariat, one of their clients. And then Goodlin and Enheng, Robert Goodlin and Jeff Enheng wrote a paper for World Watch Institute, and they estimated it at 51%. And they included at least a couple new factors that the IPCC hadn't included. They included animal respiration, and they included some accounting for carbon opportunity costs. What if we rewilded some of that land? Not all of it, but some of it. And they said, wow, it comes to 51% of greenhouse gases are caused by animal agriculture. Well, my friend Silas Rao did a paper that was published in 2021, in which he said, what if we took all the land that we know was forest in the year 1800 that's now used for animal agriculture and restored all that land to forest, and accounted not just for that, but for not just for the respiration from the trees, but for the soil, because the soil retains a lot of carbon, and the soil is a lot healthier when it has forest than when it's being grazed and degraded and burned into desert. So accounting for the above ground sequestration in the trees and the storage of the soil on all that land, and without including animal respiration, Silas came up with a figure of at least 86% of greenhouse gases are caused. Oh, did I say 86? I think 87. At least 87% of greenhouse gases are caused by animal agriculture. And I had a conversation with Silas a few months ago, and I said, you know, Silas, there are some factors that you didn't include because it's very hard to get the numbers. One of them is with industrial fishing, because that's the other thing we have to do to save the world. We have to stop industrial fishing. Well, the industrial fishing boats trawl the bottom of the ocean, and they kick up sediment and reduce the carbon capture of the ocean. What if we stopped industrial fishing and we had healthier oceans, and we were stopped kicking up that sediment? We had healthier sea forests and healthier phytoplankton populations. Now, nobody has the numbers on how much that could help. But if you do a rough, an estimate on that, and also Silas didn't include animal respiration. And I said, what if you included animal respiration and you did an estimate for what healthy sea forests and healthy phytoplankton populations might do? What percentage? You're already at 87%. What percentage do you think it would be if you included those factors? And Silas said, it might be like 120%, something like that. And I laughed. How could it be more than 100%? More animal agriculture is responsible for more than 100% of greenhouse gases? I laughed, but Silas says, no, it can be. Because remember, when we talk about greenhouse gases, we're talking about how much we contribute per year into the atmosphere. But we need to pull down more than that if we're ever going to have what's called drawdown. It would be like a budget surplus. If you said, if you take the budget and you say, can we ever give it a balanced budget? Well, not only can you get a balanced budget, you can get a budget surplus if you do things right. So this would be like a budget surplus. And animal agriculture may well be responsible for, get this, let me be the first to say it in public on your show, 120% of greenhouse gases, if you included all the factors.
Wow.
So to focus just on, energy efficiency and miles per gallon of our cars and the oil industry, it's missing the point. I'm all in favor of energy efficiency. I have my old friend Dave, who called me with the when I had the English muffin. he works in that field. It's a great field. We need energy efficiency, but it's not going to, we're not going to reverse the climate crisis with smart thermostats, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, and let's talk about the oceans a little more. Just the
Yeah.
very interesting fact about whale poop. Could you
Yeah.
talk? Could you tell us about whale poop?
Yeah. Um, uh, the whale poop actually uh, helps feed the phytoplankton, and the phytoplankton actually seed clouds. So again, it's a complex web of life, and we don't. There's an arrogance to interfering with it when we don't even understand how it all works. But if we let the whale population be restored, it will help the phytoplankton population be restored, which will help the clouds be formed, which will help cool the earth. So it's all part of a complex web of life, and we interfere with it. People eat lobsters, and they don't know that by eating lobsters they may be killing whales, because the lobstermen set traps on the bottom of the ocean, and then there are ropes that go to buoys on the ocean surface, and the whales get caught sometimes in their ropes. So there was a story I tell in the book of a whale, of a lobsterman who was swallowed by a whale, um, and um, and then he was ejected and unharmed. And I just hope he learned his lesson and he got out of that industry, but I don't know.
Wow. So, how do you personally stay positive and motivated to continue this work when the progress seems pretty slow, and people, like you said, it's what's so hard about making these changes, but for people it really is. There's this hardwired, there's this programming that keeps people stuck in that tunnel vision and in denial, and it makes it tough sometimes. How do you stay motivated to continue this work?
Um, I'm lucky to have my friend Silas Rao. For those who don't know Silas, he's got an organization called climatehealers.org. You could find his work there, and subscribe to his newsletter. I also have a newsletter on health, which is at my website, glenmerzer.com. But Silas is a brilliant engineer who understands the science of climate change better than I do. And he understands very well how grim it looks and how we're heading to disaster, but he's highly optimistic. And it seems odd to me how optimistic he is, but his attitude is, this is a wonderful time to be alive. We can save the planet. We can lead this beautiful global transformation to a vegan, nonviolent world. So I don't feel entitled to be pessimistic when I know that Silas is out there spreading his optimism and his joy. So I just let him influence me, and I try not to get down.
Love it. Are you up for a little lightning round so we can just get to know you a little bit better?
Sure.
Okay, got like 5 questions, I believe. Which of your books do you feel like it took the least amount of effort to write, that flowed the easiest?
That flow well, maybe Own Your Health, in that it had a lot of personal anecdotes in it. So I was just telling my story. But what I tried to do in Own Your Health is explain nutrition in a way that I hadn't seen it explained before, so that people could understand how obvious it is that we should be eating plants, not animals. People think of nutrition as being a controversial subject and a difficult subject. I'm not a scientist, but it's just the easiest thing in the world to figure out. I mean, is there anybody out there saying, let's try to cure cancer with sausages? I mean, everybody knows it. Everybody knows that it's going to be blueberries and strawberries that are going to help you more than sausage and corned beef. This isn't difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So you just follow the logic, you follow the patterns, and you realize how the food industry and the government lie to us on this stuff. And it's outrageous. And then you realize that it's very, very easy to eat human food. And it's the only way forward for human health and for planetary health.
And I love how you put it in such empowering terms. We get a choice every single time we sit down to eat about what we put in our bodies and how that affects our own health and the health of animals and other people on the planet. Like, that's a very empowering situation we're in to be able to do that with our fork.
Yeah. We have to think of food as nutrition. That's what it's meant for. Now, of course, it's also pleasurable to eat, and some foods are particularly delicious. But, I like eating things. This is a new change in me that I've cultivated in the last year. I like eating things sometimes that are bland, like buckwheat cereal. There's nothing delicious about buckwheat cereal. Yeah, I can't fool people. That's not delicious. But, you take the buckwheat cereal and then you put blueberries on it. You put blackberries on it, you put strawberries on it, and then you pour spices on it. Spices are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. I mean, spices will stop cancer. Spices will make you healthy. So you got this bland substrate that you're eating, the buckwheat cereal, and then you're pouring these nutrients on it. And you just feel so good after eating it. Mm-hmm. You're not getting any unnecessary fat. You're not getting any poisons. You're getting water. You're getting healthy whole grains. And then you're getting these superfoods that you're putting on.
I do know. I definitely know. I love that. Okay. I like to think, so this is just kind of a fun one. I like to think of pet peeves or things that trigger us as teachers, just to preempt this. Do you have any pet peeves that you can
have pet peeves?
Yeah.
Leaf blowers?
They're so terrible for the environment too. I heard that they take more emissions than cars. And they're noisy.
I have seen guys with leaf blowers blowing the leaves from one lawn to the other, and then the next guy comes and he blows them back. I mean, this is not a good use of energy or time.
That's a good one.
And the noise from it's just terrible. So leaf blowers would be one. Coconut oil. Mm-hmm. Now, our people, the vegans, have a lot of companies trying to make money off us and creating vegan foods. And in the last, I'd say 3, 4, 5 years, when I go to what might be considered the vegan section of a grocery store, vegan cheeses and vegan meats and fake meats and vegan yogurts, overwhelmingly, they are using coconut oil in everything. And you look at how much saturated fat there is in, let's say, a vegan yogurt. If it's made with coconut oil, it'll be, 7 grams of saturated fat in one little cup of. I don't get 7 grams of saturated fat in a month. These are just unhealthy vegan foods because of coconut oil. And that is a big pet peeve of mine, because I want the vegans to live healthy, long lives. And the coconut oil is like a substitute for meat. I'm very, very suspicious of coconut oil. Coconut itself has a lot of saturated fat. And I don't know why nature created this delicious food that has so much saturated fat, because almost all the other delicious foods that nature created are very, very healthy.
Mhm.
But coconut, you have to be really careful with. And coconut oil is a processed food with nothing but fat. And, I wrote about this in Own Your Health. I used to have a friend who would argue with me about nutrition. He was, 50 pounds overweight. And it's always awkward to bring that up in the argument. So I wouldn't bring that up, but he would tell me that he was very worried about me, the way my obese aunt and uncle were worried about me when I became a vegetarian. He was worried that I wasn't getting enough healthy fats. And he said that what he did is every day he had 2 or 3 tablespoons of coconut oil, because it's such a healthy fat that purifies the system, and it makes you sing and hop around the room. I don't know what he thought it did. And I told him I didn't think it was healthy, and we don't argue anymore because he died of sudden cardiac arrest. So, there's just nothing healthy about a lot of saturated fat.
Thank you for that. Really important. Okay. What's your favorite response when someone asks, where do you get your protein?
Food.
I knew you were going to say that. Yes. Plants have protein. Food has protein.
Yeah. And, per calorie, you get more protein from leafy greens than from meat. So vegetables have protein. Legumes are very high in protein. There's even a tiny bit of protein in fruit. There's protein in mushrooms. There's protein all over the place. The body cannot store protein. What are you going to do with all this protein if you eat meat? You just pee it out, So, and one of the amino acids in protein, methionine, is cancer causing in excess. So you don't want a lot of methionine. So having a healthfully moderate protein diet is what you want to do. You don't want, you get more protein than that. You get protein powders, then you're just stressing your kidneys because you can't store it. It's a ridiculous obsession.
It is money. Again, always comes back to money industries. Something that was painful at the time, but looking back, you're grateful that it happened.
Wow. Something that was painful at the time, but looking back, I'm grateful that it happened. Well,
we can call it uncomfortable at the time if it wasn't painful.
Well, I think that I had a career writing in Hollywood, and there were some setbacks in my career writing, either for television or for the film industry, that were painful at the time. But then I just transitioned to writing books on advocating the vegan diet, and I feel good about what I've been doing. Awesome. And I still write screenplays and plays, so I'm still knocking my head against the wall on that.
All right, last one. What has you feeling especially inspired right now?
What has me feeling especially inspired right now? Well, I think the fact that the awareness of the climate crisis has reached a point where there are very few deniers left, and the majority is on the side of taking it seriously. I don't think the majority yet knows how to do that by changing their diets. But if they were to learn and understand that the only way to reverse the climate crisis is to eat human food, I think the people would do it, because I think people want to reverse the climate crisis. And if you think about it, even if we stopped all use of fossil fuels tomorrow, somehow all the cars overnight became electric, and all the electricity was generated by the sun. And we stopped cooking with gas and stopped warming our homes with fossil fuels. Even if that happened overnight, we're still going to be slowly warming because of all the greenhouse gases that are created by animal agriculture. So there's no path that way. And we're not going to have solar airplanes anytime soon.
Well, Glenn, you're an inspiration. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Where can people find you, connect with you, get your books, your podcast? You've got a podcast.
Oh, that's right. I started a podcast.
Yeah, tell us.
Glen Merzer Show.
Yes.
The Glen Merzer Show podcast. Well, if you just Google the Glen Merzer Show podcast, you'll find that. I would love to have more subscribers. I just started this recently. And then I have a website, glenmerzer.com. That's Merzer with a Z. And I have a newsletter that I send out, a free newsletter, the Own Your Health newsletter. And my books can be found on Amazon: Own Your Health, Food is Climate, Mad Cowboy, and the books with Chef AJ. AJ and I have a book out, her unprocessed cookbook, and she has a book called The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss.
Yes, we will put all of those in the show notes. Glenn, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ella. I enjoyed it.
Hey.